All right, hey everyone. Welcome to the RotoPros pre-lock show for Wednesday. A bit of a late start today, so I'll just get right into it. Starting with the high-end pitchers, as always, I really don't feel great about any of these choices. So I think there's an idea for this slate that Steven Strasburg is a safe option. Strasburg has definitely had some concerning appearances this year. He wasn't very good in his last start against the Diamondbacks. For the season, Strasburg is striking out less hitters than he has basically at any point in his career since 2013. His strikeout rate has fallen below 10 Ks per nine for the first time since then. He's a 420 FIP, a 321 XFIP. The concern for Strasburg, I think, it's two main things. He's giving up a lot of homers this year, and he's also not throwing his pitches nearly as often in the strike zone. So I think home runs might be a little fluky. It's a pretty small sample to measure home run to fly ball rate, but zone and plate discipline numbers do stabilize much quicker. Like we can gather more from those numbers much earlier in the season. So Strasburg's swinging strike percentage is down to 11.1%, which is still pretty close to his career average, but it's a lot worse than when he was much better last year. Last year was his best season as a major league starter, and it kind of looks like the outlier right now, where he's kind of reverted back to 2015 and 2016 Steven Strasburg, which was still a really good pitcher, but not as good as he was last year with the 2.50 ERA. So I think Strasburg is definitely still a very good strikeout pitcher with a lot of upside against a Pirates offense that is kind of just okay. The bigger issue with Strasburg, though, is he's not throwing his pitches in the strike zone nearly as often. So career average first strike percentage for Strasburg is 63%. The last few years, he's been 63.5, 65.5, 65.5, 65. This year, he's down to 60. And he's also throwing pitches in the strike zone in general 44% of the time. The last couple of years, he's been right around 50%. So he's just throwing less strikes. He's doing it less often on the first pitch, which also indicates that it's not just that he's trying to get more chases on two strike counts. He's not hitting the strike zone on the first pitch of at bats. So it's pretty troublesome. I don't really know how much to read into this, but there are better choices. So if you have the salary to pay up for Strasburg, I don't even think I would do it because I think there are pitchers cheaper than him who should score more points. So just to rule one guy out before I get to those guys, Jacob deGrom is the most expensive pitcher. He's facing the Braves, who are tied with the Yankees for the highest WRC plus in baseball this year. It's a really brutal matchup. The line movement is very strongly against deGrom. So Vegas lines are kind of tough to figure out when they matter. They tell us who should score the most runs in entire games, and it's kind of just an indication of what the public thinks about who should score the most runs for a game. But it doesn't say too much about how many strikeouts the pitcher is going to get. It really doesn't say anything about that. It doesn't really say anything about bullpen ability. So it's kind of just a useful tool to see where someone might be overrated or underrated. And I think the Braves offense is still pretty undervalued. So the public is betting on the Mets at a 75% clip. And even with that, the opening line of minus 185 for the Mets is all the way down to minus 145 to minus 150, somewhere in that range, depending where you look. So the Braves are seeing a lot of line movement despite the fact that no one's betting on them, which indicates that sharper bettors are really betting the Braves heavy for the casinos to adjust as much as they have been. And I think the main reason for this is just that the Braves offense with Acuna now in the starting lineup is just better. He's the best prospect in baseball, and the offense was already decent. Freddie Freeman's a good hitter. Ozzie Albies is good. And calling Freeman a good hitter definitely undersells him. He's a very, very strong hitter. And the rest of the Braves lineup is kind of just okay. They have Tyler Flowers back tonight. Ender Inciarte is batting ninth, but I think he's still okay. The only two weak spots in the lineup really are Ryan Flaherty and Dansby Swanson. Nick Markakis is still kind of decent, I guess. But overall, it's a really strong lineup because of how good the high-end talent is, and it makes for a pretty tough matchup for deGrom. So I'm definitely off of him tonight. I'm probably off Strasburg, and that means we're going to have a lot of salary savings at pitcher. So the guys that I actually do want to target The primary choices for me are James Paxton and Aaron Nola as the more expensive guys. So I think Nola is the safest pitcher tonight. He is facing the worst offense. The Marlins are just awful. They don't strike out a ton, but they also just don't hit the ball very hard. They have a lot of very weak contact hitters. Justin Bour is back tonight. Derek Dietrich is out of the lineup, but Nola only has to face one left-handed batter. Justin Bour is the only one. I'm just going to get Nola's splits because I'm pretty sure that Nola has pretty strong righty-lefty splits where he is much better against righties. But either way, Nola has a good chance to get the win bonus going opposite Jose Urena. The strikeout numbers for Nola are down this year, but the swinging strike percentage is still pretty good. So I think he should be fine in terms of strikeouts. But Nola is just a really good pitcher. He's kind of on the level of some of these high-end guys, and he's facing the worst offense in a pitcher's park. Miami sometimes plays as a little bit more of a hitter's park when the roof is open, but it's supposed to be raining there tonight, so the roof should be closed. So Nola for his career against lefties, 7.4 Ks per nine, 3.4 walks per nine, 398 FIP, 426 xFIP, kind of just mediocre against left-handed batters. Against righties, Nola is 10.6 Ks per nine, 1.6 walks per nine, 285 FIP, and 267 xFIP. So Nola is as good as you can possibly be against right-handed batters, and the Marlins have 8 of them in their lineup, including the pitcher spot. So it sets up really well that Justin Bour is the only lefty in there. It'd be nice if he wasn't playing too, but it's only so much of a matchup we can really ask for. So Nola is probably my favorite pitcher on this entire slate. And it was James Paxton as of last night. So Paxton's got some of the same kind of troubling line movement against him that Jacob deGrom has. It's not really to the same extent, but it's the same kind of impact where the majority of public bettors are on the Seattle side of the game, but the line is still moving towards the Oakland side of the game. Even beyond that, though, just kind of on paper, it's clear the A's have a really good offense. They rank 3rd behind the Braves and Yankees. There's a lot of power on Oakland's offense, and Paxton has been definitely more walk-prone this year than he has been in years past. I think the number is 4.5 walks per nine. Let's see. 4.3. So 12.5 Ks per nine. Obviously, there's massive upside for James Paxton, but there's a reason he has a 5.12 ERA this year, and I think it's only partially due to bad luck. Paxton is not getting a lot of ground balls this year, 31.6%. He's giving up 13% home run to fly ball rate, which is more fluky than the ground ball rate. But if he's going to put balls in the air and they're going to be hard hit, then he's going to have a lot of problems. And Paxton is not really someone who's great at limiting hard contact. So Paxton has downside. I think he has a lot of upside. He's probably someone I want in about half my lineups because I think he could really end up very heavily on one or the other side of the spectrum tonight. So I may even want to stack against him a little bit, especially because it'll be contrarian. Not so much because I think Paxton will be chalky. I just don't think too many people are going to be stacking against him. They're just offenses against worse starting pitchers, and I think they're going to command a lot of the ownership tonight. But I'll get to offense. I think 3 or 4 offenses could have mostly, if not all of the ownership. So Paxton has the strikeout potential even in a tough matchup. So I like him not as much as Nola, but he is a lot cheaper. So yeah, I think 50% or so on James Paxton makes sense. All right. So then the next 2 guys are pitchers who both have very, very high ERAs this year, but I think both are very strong plays. I'm going to just kind of mention a couple other pitchers that are fringy that I think could be considered, but I just won't be using before I get to them. So Zach Godley, I think, is okay at 7,600. Sean Newcomb is okay at 7,600. Both have semi-tough matchups, but they're both just kind of underpriced for their strikeout upside. So if you have strong convictions about those 2 guys, I don't have a problem with them. I just prefer guys that are cheaper. And then I think there was one more guy in that price range. He looks okay. No, that's probably about it. So Godley and Newcomb are probably the closest guys to using that I'm just not going to use. I guess they're my 5th and 6th favorite starters. So it would be Nola, Paxton, and then 2 of these cheaper guys. So If you've heard me talk about them before, well, at least one of them, you're going to know who it is. I'll start there. Luis Castillo at home against the Brewers. And yeah, I'm doing internal groans at myself for even mentioning his name again. But Castillo still has a ridiculously high swinging strike rate. He was incredibly good last year. He has a pretty good minor league track record, and he's facing a very strikeout prone team in the Milwaukee Brewers, who don't have Eric Thames right now. Lorenzo Cain is out of the lineup tonight. So it's a little bit extra, a little bit more righties than usual. Jesus Aguilar doesn't usually play against righties. He's in there tonight. John VR is leading off. He's not a particularly good hitter. So Castillo is just really, really cheap at 5,300. I think there's still upside for him to be a very good strikeout pitcher as soon as right now. It may take him a little longer to figure things out, but I think even right now he might be a really good strikeout pitcher. So he's a very, very boom or bust pick. But I think it's worth the risk. And the main reason I think it's worth the risk, even though we don't need the savings, is because the main reason is because the Brewers are probably going to be the highest owned offense tonight. So I think people will look at Castillo and say that he's awful. He's given up a lot of home runs this year. He's just given up a lot of runs. On the surface, he looks like a very, very bad pitcher. And the Brewers generally are a popular stack target. I think people just kind of stack against the Reds blindly because they're the Reds and they have a reputation for being really bad at pitching. The Reds don't have a very good bullpen, although it's kind of okay. They have some good relievers on the back end, like Raisel Iglesias is good. I don't know if Amir Garrett is good as a reliever, but yeah, it's not the worst bullpen in baseball, even if it's a below average one. But I think a lot of people will be on the Brewers, so there's certainly leverage in Luis Castillo if he actually happens to have a strong game. And if he's the highest scoring pitcher on the slate tonight, I honestly wouldn't be that surprised. So for 5,300, he's worth the flyer. I think even if he were 6,000 or 7,000, I'd still probably consider him. So I think this could end up being a night to leave salary on the table because some of these pitchers are just so ridiculously underpriced. The other guy that I like a lot, and probably more than Castillo, and potentially more than James Paxton also, is Andrew Heaney. So Heaney is good at one thing, getting strikeouts, and he's facing the Orioles, who strike out a lot. He's also at home. We don't have a full Orioles. Let me just double check that if we have the Orioles lineup. But Jonathan Scope is on the DL, so they don't have him. Adam Jones should be in there. Machado, obviously. Yeah, still no official lineup. But Jones, Mancini, Machado should be in there. Mark Trumbo probably will be playing too, but he's a reverse splits hitter. Danny Valencia is good against lefties. So it's not really the best matchup in terms of security. There's definitely power in the Orioles lineup, but there's also a lot of strikeouts in the Orioles lineup, and Heaney has the upside. So I kind of have in this category as Castillo, but I think he has a little bit easier of a matchup. He's got a little bit better of a track record as a strikeout pitcher, at least this year. So Heaney has a 13.8 K per 9 rate in 14 innings this year, and he's doing it with a swinging strike rate of 13.3%. So it looks pretty sustainable. And even though his ERA is 6.91, a lot of that, well, some of it's the home runs, but he's allowing a 429 batting average on balls in play, and he's only stranding 50% of base runners. So he's just basically been unable to get out of jams. He's allowing kind of just a moderate amount of hard contact, but the batting average on balls in play is still really high. So the bottom line is that Heaney's been really lucky. He has a ton of strikeout upside against the Orioles, and I think he makes for a strong play at a very cheap price. So the pitching priority for me in order is going to be Nola, Paxton, Heaney, and Castillo. I kind of want to have a fairly evenly distributed amount of exposure to them. So I think it could be something like 70% Nola, 50% Paxton, 50% Heaney, and 30% Castillo. Not paying up for Strasburg or DeGrom is going to mean there's some salary left on the table, but I think I'm okay with that because the expected output for the high-end guys, I don't really even think it's much higher, and it might not even be higher at all than some of these mid to low priced guys. So that's going to do it for pitching, and I guess I'll get into offense, try to get through this quickly so that you guys can all go make lineups. So the Brewers should be the chalkiest offense. I'm probably fading them entirely. I think you could stack them against Castillo. There's clearly downside for Castillo, but it's just not the route I want to go tonight. I think it's going to be too high of ownership for it to really be worth doing. So if it were a contrarian play where Castillo would have some ownership, then I think I would do it. But I really think the Brewers hitters could all be 20 to 30% owned, especially at the high end. So I don't really have any interest in Milwaukee. I would say the cheaper the tournament, the more you should have them, because at higher stakes, I think they'll be even more highly owned. But I'm not even that sure of that, because I think it's possible that some sharper players could be on Luis Castillo. So either way, the Brewers will have ownership. I'm not sure what stakes they'll have the most ownership, but I don't really love the expected output for them against Castillo, who I do think is still a pretty good starting pitcher. So I'm going to be off the Brewers. My favorite offense for tonight, going into, well, I guess starting last night when we did the podcast, was the Reds. There are some issues with Wade Miley. I think he's a little bit underrated. He's definitely bad, but I think he's a little bit underrated. One of the bigger issues is that you can't steal bases off him. So for DFS upside, it hurts a lot, because the one thing Miley is very good at is holding base runners. So for Jose Peraza batting second, probably almost no chance he steals a base tonight, and that's a lot of where he gets his fantasy production from. Definitely fading Billy Hamilton tonight. If he's in a bad matchup for stolen bases, then you really can't use him, because that's kind of the only thing that Billy Hamilton can do. But I do like Adam Duvall and Eugenio Suarez as plugs. I think they'll be popular. I think what'll keep Suarez's ownership down is that Travis Shaw will be a more popular pick. So maybe you can get Suarez at like 15% owned or so. And I think that's worth doing against a lefty like Miley. So I like Suarez. I like Duvall. I think playing Votto alongside them is fine. I think Mesoraco and Blandino are good value plays for cheap. I would probably use Jesse Winker if it's a stack. I don't think I would use him by himself. And same for Peraza, only in stacks. But the focus there is definitely the heart of the order from 3 to 5, maybe 6, with Suarez and Duvall being the priorities for the Reds. So the other teams to use, I think there's some merit to stacking very contrarian teams tonight, because I think Strasburg and DeGrom are going to really have a lot of ownership. So stacking the Pirates, I mean, it probably isn't going to work out, but no one's doing it. They're really cheap. But I guess that doesn't matter too much, because we're going with cheaper pitching anyway. So the Pirates are definitely a very, very boom or bust stack there, where they almost definitely won't work. But if it does work, you're going to be the only one who does it. I don't think I'll go that route. I don't think I'll go much with the Braves either. I think DeGrom is good enough where the Braves' upside is kind of limited. Like, they really would have to knock DeGrom out of the game early for this to be a huge upside game. So maybe DeGrom only goes like 4 innings and gives up 3 runs and throws a ton of pitches, and then the Braves get to the weaker part of the Mets bullpen and then they can score a lot. Like, that's possible, and there are very favorable hitting conditions in New York today. So I like the Braves more than I like the Pirates as a contrarian stack. But I don't actually think we have to go with a big underdog to get a good contrarian team, because my favorite contrarian team of the night, and potentially my favorite offense overall, is the Yankees. So the Yankees are kind of expensive, but if we're paying down at pitching, then it's pretty easy to fit them. And there's so much offensive upside for the Yankees. They're, without a doubt, the most powerful offense in baseball. They probably are just the best hitting team overall. It's not too hard to figure out who to use for stacks. I mean, you have Judge, Didi, Stanton, Sanchez. Aaron Hicks is leading off tonight at 3,500. So I think that's a pretty good 1 through 5 stack. Dallas Keuchel has definitely been worse this year. His velocity is down just a bit, but he's striking out less guys. He's walking more guys. He's given up a decent amount of runs this year. He actually got lit up by the A's 2 starts ago. But I just don't think Keuchel is as good anymore. He definitely fell off his peak from a few years ago. So let me just get Keuchel's stats in front of me and stop guessing on him. And I'll get to the Vegas line on this game in a second, because it is fairly telling. Okay. So Keuchel this year, 7 Ks per 9, 3 walks per 9, 478 FIP, 396 xFIP. Those numbers are way above his career numbers. He's getting less ground balls than he has in the past at 56%, which is still high, but not as high as it had been. And the swinging strikes are down to 8.1% for Keuchel. That is the lowest number for him by quite a bit, basically since his rookie season in 2012, where he was just terrible. Last year, the swinging strike percentage was 10.9. This year, it's 8.1. So he's getting way less swings and misses. He's giving up way more contact. I think he's also throwing the ball in the strike zone more because he's not getting guys to chase as much out of the zone. I'm not sure if there are tangible changes in the way that games are being officiated for him, the way the umpires are calling it, where Keuchel relies on getting called strikes at just a few inches below the strike zone. And if he's not getting that call, it's really hard for him to navigate through a batting order. He just is going to end up walking way more guys, and I think that has happened to him. But whatever you think of Keuchel, the Yankees have a ton of upside against any pitcher, and they're not going to have much ownership tonight because I think the Brewers, the Reds, the Mariners, and probably the Nationals are all going to be pretty chalky. So the Yankees have a ton of tournament upside. I think they're a really strong play tonight. And just to mention the Vegas line before I get to a few other teams and then wrap this up. The over-under for the game opened at 8.5, at 8, kind of towards 7.5. It was 8, but trending down. And then the line fell almost to 7 with the game at Pick'em. But since that point, the over-under is actually bumped up above where it started. So now it's at 8, trending up to 8.5. And the Yankees are now minus 125 favorites, despite the fact that most people are betting on the Astros. I think the roof should be open tonight, and the wind is helping, and it's really warm in Houston. So it's really favorable hitting conditions. I think Keuchel is pretty overrated. The Yankees are going to be under-owned, and they could just hit a ton of home runs tonight because there's potential for them to do that against anybody. So the Yankees actually are my favorite offense tonight, partly because their expected output is one of the highest, but also because I like cheaper pitching and you can easily afford to pay up for the Yankee bats. So the priority is going to be Yankees number 1, Reds number 2. I think the Braves are worth a flyer. I think the Brewers could be worth a flyer or 2, depending on what you think of Luis Castillo. And then I think the Mariners make sense as plugs, although I really don't think Brett Anderson is that bad. He has been a good ground ball pitcher throughout his career. He was pretty unlucky last year with an ERA over 6, but peripherals that suggested he should have been in the 4s. He does give up a decent amount of hard contact, but he also was really good in his minor league appearances in, I guess, in rehab or spring training or whatever, getting ready for this start. So I think Anderson is kind of just okay, maybe a little below average. And I do think the Mariners will have some ownership. So I'm okay with them. I don't love the spot. Some of their guys are a little expensive. Haniger's up to 4,900. Segura's 44. Cruz is 44. I think he makes the most sense. And then Cano and Gordon are left-handed, so it's a little bit tougher for them. So for similar prices, I like the Yankees more, but I think the Mariners are okay. And then the only other offense I'll mention is the A's, because I think that they're good enough that they have a lot of upside against anyone. They're actually running a lineup against Paxton that has 9 right-handed batters, 8 in a switch hitter with Matt Olson on the bench. So this could be pretty tough for Paxton. I'm just going to pull up his splits quickly because I think Paxton is pretty good against righties, but he's still worse than he is against lefties. So this year he's actually been worse against lefties, I think, because Yonder Alonso has homered off him twice. I think that makes all the difference for him. But last year, Paxton had a 190 FIP and 298 xFIP against lefties, 275 FIP and 331 xFIP against righties. He got more strikeouts against righties, but also walked more guys and gave up more homers. Actually, I'm not sure if Paxton even gave up a single homer to a left-handed batter last season, but he's already given up 2 this year. Kind of strange. But anyway, the A's are good enough that they have upside against anyone. The Mariners' bullpen is really bad. So if they can get to Paxton, I think it's a really similar situation to the Braves, where if they get past the starter, there is just a lot of upside there. Like this A's team scored 16 runs in a road game against Alex Wood a few weeks ago. So they have the potential to do that against anybody. So I think that's going to wrap it up. I'll just kind of summarize. I know it was Logan that had asked about expensive plugs. I really don't think I'm going to have too many because I am stacking the Yankees the most. So the plugs are kind of just going to be in the mid-range, some Mariners guys, some Reds guys. Some expensive hitters I definitely do like tonight where I don't like the stacks. I think Machado is a good play in lineups without Heaney. I think Trout is fine against Bundy. I think Rhys Hoskins is a better play than both of those guys for an expensive plug against Jose Urena. The issue with stacking the Phillies is just the park is a little difficult, and they're not that cheap, and they're also just not that good offensively. But I do like Hoskins. Someone on YouTube is asking Severino. Severino's a little expensive. I mean, it's a brutal matchup against Houston on the road, and he's not really priced down too much for it, and the hitting conditions are really favorable. Like the warm weather with the open roof is going to be tough. So I think Severino has upside, but he would need to be cheaper for me to want to use him. Like Paxton's cheaper, Nola's only slightly more expensive. I think those are all comparable pitchers, and the other ones have much better matchups. So yeah, no go for Severino, but yeah, I guess he is worth at least mentioning. So yeah, the expensive plugs, Hoskins. I think you can use Bryce Harper, even though I don't really like national stacks because I think Ivan Nova is just kind of an average pitcher, maybe slightly above average. And he's been a little bit better this year. So the Nationals lineup, it's not really a good lineup. They just have, I mean, Harper's a really good hitter. I think Turner's fine, but there aren't too many good hitters. I guess Adams and Kendrick are decent. And then after that, there's a very severe drop-off. So I think you can use Cespedes against Sean Newcomb. Cespedes is good against lefties. I think Freeman and Acuna are fine. Albies is fine. But the priorities here, just to recap, are Nola. I'll kind of give the percentages here. I think Nola 70%, Paxton 50%, Heaney 50%, and Castillo 30% to make up the DraftKings pitching exposure. And then for offense, out of 20 lineups, I think I'd probably make 10 to 12 Yankee stacks. And then maybe 3 or 4 Reds, and then just kind of like 1 to 2 each of a few other teams like the Braves, the A's, probably the Mariners, and I guess the Brewers, although I don't think I'll go that route. So unless anyone has any other questions, I think that should do it. All of you guys are good. 6 o'clock now. Got 1 hour until lock, roughly. So thanks for watching, and I think same time tomorrow, probably earlier tomorrow. I think it'll be back to 5 o'clock again. So see you then, and good luck tonight.